Hello, today is Friday, October 25th, 2019. I'm Joe Schmidt from TC2, and this is Staying Connected. If you work with technology, you no doubt have heard about IoT, or the Internet of Things. In fact, we've recorded several podcasts where we've covered IoT. Today, we want to look at IoT from a different angle, where IoT could actually be an acronym for the Interdependence of Transactions, or more precisely, the interdependence of numerous transactions. To help lead this discussion, I'm joined by Deb Boehling, a partner at LB3. Okay, Deb, thanks for joining me. Now, you say that IoT could just as easily be an acronym for the interdependence of numerous transactions. Why is that?
Thanks, Joe. As you pointed out, IoT refers to the Internet of Things. IoT is an ecosystem of sensors or monitors and smart devices that collect and share data wirelessly without human intervention. Each piece of the system has an IP address that allows it to connect and communicate over the Internet. That sounds a bit opaque, but it's likely that a consumer or company uses some IoT ecosystem already. Let me give some examples. The home security systems, such as Nest that is advertised all the time, smart watches with health applications, the new Apple watches, the Fitbit with the heart rate, and those reports that come in weekly and make me look not so good. Connected appliances, from minimal connections for trouble diagnostics, like my washing machine when it's having more problems than I would like, to ongoing constant checking of refrigerator for temperatures or contents. There's also public safety cameras and traffic cameras, insulin pumps and continuous glucose monitors, banks that provide low balance alerts or withdrawal from the ATM that go above the limits that you've set. There's sewage system monitors, and there's package tracking. In fact, IoT was named 20 years ago when Kevin Ashton of P&G used the term for RFID supply chain management.
That's interesting, and that's also a great list. And it does show that IoT is going to continue, in my opinion, to blur the line between consumer and enterprise when we talk about the IoT ecosystem. But Deb, why is IoT an interdependence of numerous transactions?
Each of those IoT devices and examples that I provided, they're an ecosystem of individual components. And each of those components is manufactured or purchased and then combined.
So there are more components than just the endpoint like a sensor and the transport like 5G. What are some of those other components?
Well, there are a variety of different hardware, and each has unique purposes and requirements. First, as you mentioned, the sensors transmitters. Those are the devices that sense the environment and convert physical parameters to electronic signals and transmit the electronic signal to the cloud. There are accelerometers, temperature sensors, magnetometers, proximity sensors, gyroscopes, image sensors, and the list goes on. Of course, you need power to work, preferably low power or a wired connection so that there's not a need to change the battery so often. You also need to be self-identifying and self-validating. And what I mean by that is the piece of equipment that is involved in this system. We need to make sure that it is properly joining with the solution. And authentication and authority issues are key. The new California privacy law requires individual password for each connected device. You can't have a single default password. That's a violation. So you must consider that as you go through this. The electronic communications code in Europe is also looking very carefully at the way in which these devices and personal information will be transmitted.
Now, Deb, as you know, many of our clients are now more dependent on cloud-based applications and resources than ever before. Does the cloud factor into the IoT ecosystem?
It sure does. With IoT, you'll have central cloud-based computing resource, analytics of the data that's been received, and software that runs the analytics. As you've said, there's transport services. The connection might be cellular, and IoT is a big driver for 5G. The connection to share that data could also be satellite or Wi-Fi or some other form of transport. Joe, it's an extensive list, and I could keep going.
That is a lot of components. Where does the interdependence of transactions come into play when an enterprise buys an IoT solution and negotiates a contract for IoT?
The interdependence of transaction comes into play because certain contracts offer the services only with certain equipment and certain protocols. And you have to align the various contracts to make sure the vendors are selected and the proper contracts are negotiated. For example, if vendor A only uses protocol Z and you're using protocol Y, you need to make sure to choose a different vendor and one that will meet your requirements. Keep in mind that once your IoT service is up and running, the failure of a single component will likely impact the entire service. There's the timing for the delivery of the components. So you've negotiated your contract, but you need to make sure that all the components are there. With IoT, you need to factor in longer times to bring your services to market. You're depending on all of your different vendors. You also may want to mitigate early unnecessary costs, particularly in hosting, SaaS, and cellular fronts, and extend your performance times so delays in your performance are less costly. You want to start payment when all components of the IoT solution have been delivered and accepted, or seek credits to offset payments required before all components are delivered by all vendors. Risk shifting abounds in IoT transactions, and negotiations for reasonable risk sharing are lengthy. This risk shifting means there's another interdependent transaction before you can go to market, your customer contract. But that's a whole separate set of transactions.
Okay, thank you, Deb. I guess you're right. That IoT acronym could have a couple of meanings, and enterprises would be wise to be thinking about the technical and the commercial complexities that lie ahead with the Internet of Things. As I mentioned earlier, we've recorded a few podcasts that discuss IoT, the cloud, and other topics covered today. We've also written several articles on the subject, so check them out if you'd like to learn more. If you do want to discuss IoT, or if you have other ICT needs, you can contact Deb, me, or any of our LB3 and TC2 colleagues by giving us a call or sending us an email. You can also stay current by subscribing to the Staying Connected podcast on a number of platforms, including iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. You can also check out our new websites or follow us on LinkedIn.